Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet, along with Ken Wiebe from Sportsnet for the Kenny and Renny Show, our Friday shows, which we absolutely adore. And why not? We get such great guests on this show and have such a good time spending time with them. And it's no different today, Ken, as we got a great show coming up. Craig Simpson is going to join us in about 10 minutes from now, fresh off his call of Game 1 between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Montreal Canadiens last night. And later in the show, Greg Millen is going to join us. Millsy, absolutely, a mentor for me in my career so far, at least in my time spent on Hockey Night in Canada. So really excited to catch up with those guys. Two guys who've got their life stories are so long, right? Because you go back to their playing career days, which lasted so long, and then all the stuff that they've done in between on top of being the broadcasters that they are and that we respect so much. So much to catch up with on them. And I feel like I got to catch up with you because every time we spend like a day or two apart, I feel like I haven't seen you for so long. And you pop up on the screen here, and it's always so good to see you. How are you doing, Ken?
Excellent, Sean. Yeah, been an interesting week for sure. The hockey has been fun to watch. Always a strange situation when the other series starts so far in advance of the one that we are covering with a little bit more closeness, if you will. And again, first world problem, but I think I have to say it on the show. Wednesday was the first Jets playoff game that I didn't cover in person, and it felt kind of strange. But we know that the pandemic is, that's what's caused that. And again, this is not a complaint. It just kind of felt strange because we're so used to being in the building and covering these events. So
it's super weird, right? Like it's super weird to be in this position where usually we're so close to it. And here we are. I was down at the City TV building taking care of it, and you're writing, off the quotes that. That's the new way things go with the Zoom calls and everything like that. But very weird situation. And it's just one of those ones that makes it so I can't wait to get back to normal. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially when what we were seeing in other arenas, when you see what's going on in Vegas and Florida and, Tampa last night and Carolina, I covered so many games in that building where there weren't a lot of people in there, and then to see the atmosphere with 12,000 or whatever there was. So super interesting for sure.
Yeah,
that is a good one. I just for the record, I was in the rink for every game in 2018, so I don't think that has anything to do with me being in or out of an arena. But we appreciate the insight from those fans that are following along for sure.
When you're talking about luck, though, can people try and justify everything? So people are maybe thinking that your luck ran out on the team in 2018, and it's been a problem ever since. You know what I mean? But
hey, I'm happy to take whatever blame is necessary for sure. So, but if we had any influence on the game, we probably wouldn't be working in the media, Sean, as most people know.
That's exactly how it goes. Every time I was doing a podcast last night, and they'd had me on because they had me on last year because I picked the Stanley Cup final and
right.
and eventual winner correct at the beginning of the playoffs. So they said, well, we had to get you back on because you did such a good job with your picks last year, and we wanted your picks this year. And I said, well, my pick at the beginning of this year was Colorado in the final with the Philadelphia Flyers. So let's not, I'm not going to dislocate my shoulder, pat myself on the back here, because you, like me, know that if we were the guys who were constantly picking the winners all the time, we wouldn't be doing this. Like you said, what was really fascinating, Ken? I took a course because sports and betting is becoming so much of a bigger thing. And so I'm taking courses at Sportsnet to kind of get you versed in this kind of stuff so you can have an idea of these kind of things when you're talking about it on air. So we talked to a guy who is essentially a professional gambler, and he was giving us kind of the ideas of the ins and outs of it. And he'd said, what do you think a successful gambler's win rate is? And I'm going to ask you that, Ken. What do you think it is? Like, if you're a sports gambler, what do you think a successful rate is?
Oh, man. I don't know. And depends on what your scale of wager is. Sorry, I'm trying to process this through my head.
Just take a stab, percentage. Like, let's say, like if I came to you tonight and I said
below 50. I think below 50 because the way the odds, you're generally not betting always favorites, so you can be under 50 but still be above in terms of the pot is what I would say.
Forget the odds. Let's just say straight up, there's 12 games. You're going to pick 12 games, and no matter what, if it's like the best team in the league playing the worst team in the league and every guy is out in injury, all those games. You've got 12 games and you pick that night after night. Give me what you think the percentage would be.
Well, I would think a successful percentage would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 out of 12, I would guess.
Yeah.
But it's probably lower.
Not even close. Not even close. So apparently, break even for a professional sports gambler, break even before you start making money is 53%, because essentially you got to pay the house their cut, right? So you need to get a little bit over 50% to break even. But apparently, the way he said it, there has never been a sports gambler who has had higher than 56% success rate in a year. And that is considered astronomical. And if it starts getting above that, that's when like the sports books are saying, what's going on here? There's something up here. But I was blown away by that, because basically a really good year for a sports gambler is about 55% or something like that. They're running super, super hot. And so it's interesting because I always think that my father-in-law every year, when it's the NFL games are on, we pick the games every week. We do it with odds, but at the beginning, you're like, oh yeah, you're going to get this right. You're going to get this right. You're going to get this right. And then you end up just getting so much wrong. And I think, maybe in the North here right now, my picks heading into the North were for the Edmonton Oilers to win and the Toronto Maple Leafs to win. And both those teams have lost those games so far. And it's getting to be kind of a fascinating part of the industry. And clearly we're heading more and more that way. And the one thing that I'm hopeful of when we do head in that direction is that the injury reports and things like that we're hearing are going to get a lot clearer, right? Because that's always a fun time as a reporter to ask questions. And you're always great at getting on that. I've heard there's times I can remember distinctly where you tried 10 ways from Sunday to ask Paul Maurice who was in the lineup and not in the lineup. And he'll always say, he'll give you some kind of answer and say, but I appreciate you trying, Ken, or nice try, Ken.
Yeah, the only clear, I'm not providing any clarity for you for about the lineup other than Ehlers and Dubois were out for game one. But again, we got to kind of look for the signs that Don McDonough was in because Harkin stayed on late. So I'll be curious to see what this morning brings. We know that Pierre-Luc Dubois was in a regular jersey. So we'd always sort of thought that Ehlers was ahead of Dubois, Sean, in terms of when they return. But again, I don't have a great feel for what's going to happen in game two, but I think that Dubois has passed Ehlers on that health depth chart, if you will. If one guy might, I don't think both would return for game two, especially because winning game one kind of buys them a little bit more time. I would say Dubois is slightly ahead of Ehlers, but again, there's no way of knowing for sure. And to be honest, even if we were in the building, I don't think we would know for sure. But the one thing we know is that Ehlers has not taken a slap shot, at least in our vision, in this last week when he's been back on the ice. And probably until that happens, he probably won't be back in the Jets lineup. But let's see what the next few days bring here.
All right. Well, I absolutely love it when our guests show up early. And Craig Simpson had every excuse with that game last night to not show up early, but here he is more than on time. Craig Simpson, really appreciate you stopping by. Wanted to get you on a couple of weeks ago. You said this was the perfect time, and we totally, I'm surprised that you wanted to make time in the playoffs, but I'm so glad you did. How are you doing today, Craig?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's a sunny day here in Toronto, although it probably doesn't feel that way for a lot of Leaf fans. But just a bit of a shocking, strange game one in our series. Anyways, here, you never like to see somebody get hurt, and I hate those broadcasting moments, Ken and Sean, when there's no words that you can say to describe how you're feeling and how everybody on the ice is feeling in those kind of moments when you're worried about the health of an individual. So it was a bit of a shocking start to this series.
It's something I don't think that people, or you take this one, Ken. You take it.
No, I just have one similar experience, Craig. When I was at the Allen Cup in the 90s, when I was going to school at University of Regina, they had a defenseman that got hurt and was on the ice for a long, long time. And for me, there were no commercial breaks. This was just an online broadcast, and just trying to describe this, and now you're thinking of the family, and the player gave a thumbs up in that situation too. And just, can you describe what that moment was like? You it's bad for the player, but then when you see the kind of the thumbs up, is that like one of those signs where you're like trying to find the positives as best you can?
Absolutely. It's so much better than the alternative. I mean, the one shocking or scary thing would be if you still have no reaction while he's getting taken off. I think, this whole last year and a half of hockey with no fans in the buildings, what really sticks out is just the silence in the building. I mean, last year in the playoffs, Jake Muzzin went down, but it wasn't a violent hit. It was almost like what happened to him. But even in that moment, it was just so deathly silent. And the reaction of John when he kind of came to and he was fighting his trainers. And so I think that's probably the most disturbing thing, was even with a crowd in there, there's a little bit of a, outside noise that maybe settles it down. I mean, you could hear everything, and that's something that you don't always feel. So I just, you always hope for the best. And when you get a thumbs up, you figure, okay, that's a good starting point anyways to where he is. And that he's going to get the best care that he can, but it's still a situation that I know both sides of the benches, both teams were a little shaken up.
Who are you thinking of in that moment, Craig? Like, as a broadcaster, I guess I don't know, some people think of someone specifically, or they're talking to the fans, or like, are you thinking of the family? Or are you thinking, I mean, we saw Kyle Dubas in that moment where he kind of slaps the table with his hand. I thought was just such powerful imagery of, I mean, how much he cared in that moment and how worried he was. Like, as a broadcaster who's got the responsibility of carrying the audience and maybe family back at home, friends through that moment, who are you thinking of in that moment?
Yeah, I think you always at times you have to be reminded that these are human beings who have mom and dad and a wife, kids, and so everybody tuning in is as shocked as anyone, and it's more impactful to them. So I think you do have to be conscious. That's, for the most part, silence is better. You hate to have said something that offends anybody. It's not about the game, or it's not about what happened. I think the first thing to see was it an accident? This game happened so quickly. And honestly, guys, like in so many things we watch, even in suspensions and looking at plays, super slow-mo doesn't do it justice. Like when it happened live, Chris's eyes, I know, went up where the puck was. I was immediately like, oh, he's in trouble, because it just happened so quickly and the collision was so hard. So you're conscious of that, and you're hoping that, mom and dad at home we're going to give you the best representation of his safety as we can. I mean, that's really all you're worried about at that point. Is the player going to be okay? Is the person all right? And I guess nothing else really matters at that point.
As someone who's been in that situation, Craig, I mean, what do you think of the response? I mean, that's what hockey fans are talking about. Is a fight necessary there, or what's your opinion on that?
The fight wasn't necessary. What I said at the time was, here's what Foligno's mind was saying. I mean, you could see the conversation, and Perry's looking and going, I don't think there's any intent from Corey Perry at all. I think it was such a fast play, and in essence, he maybe did more damage trying to jump out of the way, but I think the reflex was doing that. My comment was just, here's what Foligno's trying to do in his situation. He's a new member on a team. He's saying, well, let's deal with this now. I think Corey, if you look at the discussion, Corey was like saying, there's no reason to do this, but if we're going to do it, let's get it over. And it was the end of it. I don't think there was anything needed in that case. I understand what Foligno's mindset was, and he even said pretty much as much as that afterwards. But that's one that it was kind of, you watch something like that, and so don't somebody else get hurt. Just move on and get the hockey back. And, ultimately that's what happened. The hockey moved on, and it took about the rest of that period though to regather. You know how difficult it is just emotionally to ramp it back up again.
Greg, if there's a big hockey game happening, there's a good chance we're hearing your voice on it, which means that when timely things happen, you're a perfect person to talk to. Part of what we try to do in these shows, though, is we want to tell your story. So I'm going to move on from what's happening right now. I want to kind of dig into you and your life and the things that have got you to where you are. I believe I'm correct, and you are the youngest hockey player to ever play collegiate hockey, if I'm right. What goes into preparing to be the youngest collegiate hockey player ever, both academically and athletically? Because I know your story and what you needed to do to be ready to play college hockey at 16 is it's impressive.
Yeah, it just, like so many things in life, there are times when it just organically happens. And, from a family perspective, school was always important. I had a great role model in my brother who played junior hockey, obviously, for the London Knights, but was able to go to university, which not a lot of guys were able to do. And 5 years younger for me, I looked at that and said, okay, that's a difficult task. What are the other options? And I played junior B hockey when I was 13 for the London Diamonds, and or 14, pardon me. And then as a 15-year-old in my second year, I was, clear that I couldn't play another year in the Western Junior B Hockey League. I think I led the league by like 30 points in scoring. So you were looking at development of where we're going to go. And in the OHL at that point, it looked like the chances of me maybe going to Sudbury, Sault Ste. Marie, different places that are far from home, a lot of travel, it's difficult to go to school. So my mom and dad, to their credit, my coach was a guy by the name of Randy Neal, who was a University of Michigan hockey player in his day. And of course, I had a great relationship with Ron Mason from the Ron Mason hockey schools, and he actually had tried to get my brother to go to Bowling Green when he was the coach there. So about Christmas time, we started looking into, well, what are my options? And we realized I was in grade 11 at the time. And if you remember back then, it was grade 13 in Ontario, but you only needed to have a grade 12 diploma to go to university. And so my parents, to their credit, we went to our school. We were on a semester system at Oak Ridge. I was able to, in the second half of the year, change some of my core classes to grade 12s, even though I was in grade 11. I went to night school for one class. I took a correspondence history class, and then the final one to get my 5 core classes that would allow me to graduate. I had to take grade 12 math in summer school to finish it off. So, my parents, to their credit, knew that I'd always played against older guys. Like at junior B, I was 14, the next youngest guy was 18, and the oldest was 20, turning 21. So that didn't seem like to be an overwhelming thing. And at the end of the day, I was able to do it. I went on a recruiting trip to just one weekend. It was a split series between Michigan and Michigan State. The first game was at Michigan State, and I was their host. They were my host there. And for me, the next day when we went to Michigan to watch, my mind was already made up. I was going to be a Michigan State Spartan. Ron Mason, Sean Walsh, Terry Christensen were the head coaches. Newell Brown, Mark Hamway, Ron Scott, a bunch of guys. They just treated me incredibly well. And so the decision was made, and the rest was just finish your school and make sure you get the diploma to be able to go.
So just to be clear, Craig, at the age of 15, 16, you crammed in grade 11 and grade 12. And the audience should know you had already skipped a grade earlier in your life, as had both your sisters and your brother.
Yeah, we skipped grade 3 when we started. I went from 2 to 4. So that gave me a little bit of an edge up too. But no, I just... there are times when you make decisions that you think you're chasing something you shouldn't be, or you're getting over aggressive. This just made sense, and it allowed me an opportunity to go to school. Now, I didn't know if I'd be there all 4 years or not, but I knew the opportunity was an amazing one. And the fact that I got 2 years in before my draft into the NHL gave me an opportunity to really experience something that was just a fantastic part of my life.
Craig, we have a lot of hockey parents and hockey players, that watch the program on occasion. Looking back, what was the most important part, or what's the best advice that you can give someone when they're choosing their path in terms of what they should be looking for? Yeah,
I think, too often I think there's such a hurry to say, well, I don't want my kid to be left behind. I got to give him every opportunity. It's like being a parent, buying the best things and giving the most opportunity doesn't make the child, girl or boy, that much better if they don't want to be. I think that the bottom line is have faith in what your child is as a person and what their dreams are and what their goals are. And I think that's the key component out of this. I've often said as parents have had to make difficult decisions about their kids, I've always felt the discipline of going to school and to learning and growing in that regard is really important. And I think that was sort of an important part of that part of my life. Even though I had dreams of being an NHL player, it was, you don't know what's going to happen. And I'm even a good example. My career ended early and life came pretty quickly. So I just think for parents, have faith in what your child's dreams are and goals. And, I've always said, you're not responsible for your hockey playing child's development. They are. If they want to be it, don't worry about them getting left behind. They'll show that they're worthy of being there. And at times when you push them so hard and they don't want to be there, that's where the most damage is done. So let them follow their dream for sure.
You touched on it earlier on. Your older brother Dave, following his dreams is something that inspired you. I mean, it reminds me. So my dad is from Dryden, and I have family there.
Yep.
And you'd always hear this story about this Sean Pronger kid who was coming up. Everyone was all about Sean Pronger, and then in the end, Chris Pronger kind of steps out of his shadow all of a sudden and becomes, one of the greatest defensemen of a generation. I mean, what was the push like for you? Because I hear right down to pillow fights in the family living room, you were intense and kind of establishing early that you were, going to be who you were, but while chasing your older brother down that path.
I think it's a great divide. Our kids in our family were all about 2.5 years apart, and it went girl, boy, and I was the youngest. So there's great separation between all of us in terms of our lives of where we're at. But from an athletic standpoint for me, having a brother 5 years older than you and who was a great athlete, played football at school, played sports all around, hockey was a big thing. It was a great target just because of that kind of separation where you could look ahead and say, oh, wow, that's what's coming next and I might get the opportunity. But it also pushed me to say, I want to be involved in everything. And I learned early on that I had to be tough and handle it, because if you're, say, 8 years old and the other guys are 13 and 14, if you want to play hockey with them, guess where you had to play? You had to be the goalie because nobody wanted to play goal. And so it was a good toughening up part because it was always playing against older kids. And I had the distinction of being the goalie and always getting hit in the face with a tennis ball or getting drilled in the arm. But the key was Dave would always say, hey, if you're going to cry and mom's going to come out here, you're not going to play. So you learned how to be tough. You took hits, you took shots, you took a little bit of collisions. And I think it was really a good pushing mechanism for me. He played junior B for the Diamonds when he was 16. I played there when I was 15, or he played 15, I played 14. It was always a goal to say, okay, if he can do that, then I can do that. Maybe I can do it a little younger. So he was a great role model, and it was a kind of a unique opportunity to push me to try to, dream a little bit bigger and push yourself to get better quicker.
Craig, you talked about the importance of education. Obviously, you're a curious guy. How are you able to find the balance at Michigan State to, play at that elite level and pursue that dream while also, excelling in the learning department?
I think they set it up so incredibly well for us, especially as freshmen coming in. We had a mandatory study hall for 4 nights a week where we had to go just to make sure that you didn't fall behind early on. Got you really focused on the discipline it took to be a student athlete. And I just think that anybody, if you've talked to, has gone to a major school, just the combination is there. It's not like, although the Canadian Hockey League's done a better job of integrating school into the practice time, and that everything we did was built around when school time, practice time will be here, weekends or games, it's very well coordinated. So I thought actually, the busier I was, the better I played. There are times when your brain's firing on all cylinders, and even exam time, you'd be studying and cramming, and you've got big games coming up. And I just think it was part of the natural transition of becoming a student athlete that made it really seamless. And I just loved the experience all around.
Craig, I'm going to fast forward a little bit here because I want to get this story in. I want to get to what it was like stepping into that established Oilers dressing room as the young guy. But I want to make sure I get this in because you and I spent some time together one night. But I think it was after the Heritage Classic. You told me a great story. You've got an amazing perspective on the Gretzky trade story. Where were you when all that went down? Because it's fascinating.
Yeah, you know what? Each year when we won the Stanley Cup, we'd always have negotiated a little carrot. If you know about the Oilers Stanley Cup rings, each ring has a little carrot with a bite out of the carrot. So that was always our discussion with Glenn Sather and Peter Pocklington. You'd have a negotiation as to what is going to be dangled as the extra thing. So in '88, when we won, we got 2 tickets anywhere Air Canada flies. And I was a single guy, and Gretz was like, come out to California and we'll play some golf, we'll train, we'll be ready to go for the season coming up. So I had it all planned, got there, and I got to California about August 6th. So if you know the dates that were around, and so much talk was going on about potential trade. And Wayne picked me up at the airport, and I just looked at him and said, like, well, what's going on? And it's not the day of cell phones and Twitter, and exactly. He said, well, there's a lot of stuff happening. I'm not sure what's going to go on. He was kind of downplaying it. We went to Janet had a condo at that point, went there to pick up some stuff. We were going to stay at Alan Thicke's place and look after a little guy by the name of Robin Thicke. You ever heard of him? Because Alan was gone. So Wayne pressed the answering machine button on Janet's place, and the first message was Bruce McNall. And goes, Wayne, I think this deal is probably going to come together. And my eyes are just like, hey, I'm 21 years old, on this great team that just won 4 cups in 5 years, thinking we're going to do it again. And now all of a sudden it looks like the world's falling apart. And I can't tell anybody either because nobody's talking about it. Anyways, a couple of days later, the deal happened. We woke up in the morning, and it looked like the night before was probably all going to come out and come together. So Janet woke me up and said, okay, Wayne's gone. He's gone to Edmonton. They had to do it now because too much was getting leaked. So you think back to 1988, we're out at the pool with a phone, a walk-around phone, with Walter and Phyllis, who have the press conference in Edmonton on their television, putting it on so that we could hear it because it wasn't live in Los Angeles. And here, we're trying to figure out what's going on. We're listening to that, and Walter and Phyllis were showing it for us so that we could hear it. But, as he came back, I was at the Los Angeles press conference behind the curtain, not being seen at all, because I didn't want to be an Oiler in the middle of all this. That was just an amazing thing to happen. So it was a pretty shocking time, and it was really odd and unique to be around it and see it all come together.
No kidding. Craig, the 1990 series is one that's still a lot of heartache. It's caused a lot of emotional toll in Manitoba.
Yeah.
Your perspective is so interesting on so many levels, being with the Oilers, but also having been Bob Essensa's roommate at Michigan State. What was it like for you to see what he went through, not getting the start in Game 7? And I'd love the Oilers' perspective when you found out it was Beauregard and not Essensa. Was there any psychological edge at all going into that Game 7?
Yeah, I think so. I think all of us as a team felt that Bob was the better goaltender and would probably give them the best win opportunity in Game 7. You never know. Be careful what you wish for. Sometimes you think one goalie you might be giving you the advantage, and then he stands on his head. But no, for me, I'll never forget too. I scored in I think it was the first game we lost. We didn't play well, but I had gone in my head. I know Bob knew what I like to do, forehand, backhand, deke, and I'm thinking, okay, if I ever get this opportunity on Bobby, I'm going to bait him this way. And sure enough, Asa Tikkanen gave me a pass up the middle, and I went, which Bob has seen me do a million times, fake to the forehand, went to the back, and then I pulled it back and I got him. And it's like, friend, you gotta, I get inside your head and I'm gonna find a way to get you. But you know what? I think at times it's another good lesson of how quickly things can change in a series. And, Game 5, Winnipeg was up 3-1 halfway through the game, even not just 3-1 in the series. And we were able to come back. But I do think that I would have had Bob in there in Game 7. I think he was the better goaltender. And, at the end of the day, you make those decisions as a coach, you make those gut feels. But for us as a team, I think it gave us a little edge knowing that we had Beauregard in there.
Craig, you retired at 28, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
I always, I heard a little story that just seems heartbreaking to me of, what it looks like behind the scenes when you're going through that. I'd heard that when your son Dylan was just a little toddler, he used to go and constantly grab ice and bring it to you because it was such a part of your life trying to manage the pain that you had in your back to get through. I'm wondering, for someone who had, such a high draft pick, won Stanley Cups, did so well, you're up there on the list of highest ever goals in a playoff series. We were looking the other day because Mark Scheifele had a great year. You're right up there with everyone. What kind of emotions, what kind of look back does a person like you, who's had such a successful career outside of hockey, as you mentioned earlier, but I mean, what goes through your head? What's the look back for someone like you who had that and had it taken away so early?
I think it's a great reminder of just how fragile, your body is and how quickly things can change. I would say from about the age of 24, 5, it just was my last 3 years trying to play hockey in the NHL were the worst hell I've ever physically been through. I mean, the last little while, I often said you can accept pain when it's from the outside in, but when you've got nerve pain and coming from your back, radiating down your legs, you can't stop it. It's throbbing all the time. After a game, I used to say you just want to crawl up in the corner and cry. Like there was no way to stop the pain. And so it was a good reminder, though, that I was able to retire from a game that is very difficult to retire from because of all the factors that you want to be a player. You miss being around your teammates. You love being around a dressing room full of guys trying to do exactly what you're doing. But honestly, if it was the easiest way to retire because I couldn't function. I had 2 young kids. One of the decisions that finally did it for me too, at the end of my last time in Buffalo, Dylan, who was only about a couple years old, we were at Walt Disney World, and I'm always in pain and my back's trouble, and we were waiting for the new Lion King thing to open up, and he's wanting to be on my shoulders, and we're waiting and waiting and waiting, and I'm going, I can't stand here, and I'm going, Dylan, you got to get down. And he's like, no, Dad, I don't want to do that. And I'm going, I can't even be a dad. I can't even carry my kids and do that. I'm kidding myself if I think I can be a hockey player, which I couldn't at that point too. So, in some ways it was good to get a clean break from wanting to be a pro. I knew I couldn't play hockey anymore, and so it's time to move on. And maybe that was in some ways a blessing. It happened a little bit too early for a lot of reasons, but I think in a lot of ways it was a blessing because you could make that clean slate and just say you got to look to what's next.
How'd you find broadcasting, Craig, and why do you enjoy it so much?
I think it's it's the best way to stay involved in the game and get a feel for the energy that comes from it, the excellence of all the players. I'm still amazed every night at how hard the players play. Their abilities are through the roof. They're physical attributes are amazing. I mean, I look at the speed of the game now and I go, hey, there's no way I could even play in that area. So it brings you back into what is great about being a part of a team and being a part of a game. And, you know, the opportunity now to be during the Stanley Cup playoffs and watch it unfold and be a part of the storyline, I think it's just exciting. You know, it's there's nothing ever like being a player again in your life. Coaching was probably the close part of it, because as a coaching staff, you're working with the players. But I think I get a gift every night to be in the booth and have great partners I've worked with and get an opportunity to watch great games and try to tell the stories.
Craig, we've barely scratched the surface with you, but I know that you're busy and you got stuff that you got to do. I just wanted to say there was a moment when the Heritage Classic was happening here, and you were with the Oilers team. And I remember as a colleague of yours, I went into the dressing room afterwards and you guys were all sitting around, all the old Oilers, and you're having a beer, you got the shirt off and all the hockey pants on. And hearing this story from you about, you know, the tragedy really of you having to end your career sooner. I didn't think of it at the time, but that image of you just kind of sitting in that element, having had that taken away so early in your career, and seeing you in that moment, it just makes me look at that moment differently. I'm glad you had that moment, and I'm glad you joined us here today. Really appreciate your time, and we'd love to have you back on again, because I have scratched off like 2 things off my question list, and I've got an entire page. So if we can have you back again another time to get into some more stuff, we'd really appreciate that.
Sounds great, Sean. Thanks, Ken. Good to see you as well.
Excellent.
You too. Thanks for having us, Craig. Enjoy the playoffs.
And we're going to go straight from Craig Simpson. We're going to bring in a guy that I've got just respect to the roof for, Greg Millen, joining the show here. Greg, how are you doing today?
Well, you know, you've gone from Craig, you know, perfect hair, studio guy, my colleague who always looks perfect, to Craig, to Greg, who's out at the cottage here, COVID head, forgot my shaving kit, and I have to go back to get it today in town, and here I am. So, you know, I'm up at the camp, as you guys call it. So I'm trying to put some water on at the moment, and you know what that's like. It's always challenging. So I need Ken's hairdo today. That would be perfect.
Millsy, the self-deprecating humor, no one does it as good as you. Hey, you are a guy who has got so much going on in your life, from hockey to broadcasting, all the different things. You strike me as a guy who picks up life lessons from everything that you do. So I want to know what the life lessons are that you've picked up from being a beekeeper and the owner and operator, or co-owner and operator of Bridge North Bees.
Well, I can tell you that I've learned to take instructions extremely well, because my wife knows all about bees and I know zero about bees. So you have to have a little humble pie when you're in the bee yard and just take instructions like we all know how to do anyway. And it's good practice for me. So that's the quick answer, Sean, to the question. It's something that my wife has been heavily involved in, and I'm just the one that carries things around and takes orders, if you will.
Greg, we love to unpack kind of the backstory. I mean, everyone knows you played net, but how'd you get bitten by the goalie bug, and how did that develop into an eventual career for you?
It's interesting. In fact, I think it was in probably Calgary, at that little bar we used to go to there down below. I forget the name of it now. But anyway, I was there with John Shannon. And John was producing at that point. I was getting booted around by Mike Keenan a little bit at the time, which happened a fair bit back then, and when I was in Chicago. And John mentioned to me, maybe you should try broadcasting. So I thought, okay, we can do that. We can give that a shot, because it was something I had some interest in. He thought I might be good at it. I don't know what he knew or what he thought about that, maybe doing interviews, but that's how it started. And then when I was getting booted around by Mike Keenan, thankfully, Darren Pang and I would practice up in the very top of the Chicago Stadium. Darren would do play-by-play and I would do color, and then we would switch. And that's how I got my audition tape from Lisa Seltzer, who was a longtime director in the U.S. For years and years, a real good one. So she ended up getting us an audition tape. And then at that point, We were having our fourth child, and Philadelphia offered me a two-way contract. And then I heard from the Ottawa Senators that they needed a broadcaster. And so I did 30 games for them my first year with Ottawa from that audition tape. And I also worked for Bob Gainey as a goalie coach with a completely different organization. Now, picture that today, if that could ever happen. But I was doing color for one organization and working as a goalie coach for another. And Bob, about 3 years into it, said, Greg, as he always did, maybe you should stick to TV. I don't know if he was telling me something or not. So from there on in, I went to TV, and thankful that Bob got me out of the coaching area.
Greg, where does that push come from? Because when I work with you, we'll be somewhere, we'll be down in Pittsburgh or somewhere like that, and you'll need to hop on the plane and get back because you teach now, and I want to get into that in the future. But where does that push to be so busy, to want to take on so many roles and wear so many hats at once come from?
I guess it's, we all have different personalities, and I enjoy doing a lot of different things, particularly I went back, as you're going to ask, I'm sure, about to get my master's degree about 5 years ago, and it was actually my wife that gave me incentive. She went back to get her degree in music, second degree, and she's doing a lot of work now with the youth in our area, which has been spectacular. And it gave me some incentive. So I wanted to, it was sort of a bucket list. I didn't finish my education as a player like many junior players. So I did that, and then it's sort of gone into a whole bunch of different areas, in particular character development, which I quite like, and that's another story. But so I guess it's just the idea that I've always been interested in other things, and I think it's really important for all athletes and all kids and anybody involved in sport to be multi-sport kids, and as professional athletes have different interests, because I firmly believe if you do that and be a well-rounded person, I think you can contribute more in whatever you do.
Greg, what makes a great leader?
Well, for me, it's always, we talk about, I've been working with Ivy Business School, and I have a friend that actually my wife, again, played volleyball with, who I met after I did my master's and reconnected. They've identified 11 pieces of character. So character would be my number one area for sure. And they've been able to identify character and profile character, which is a fascinating new area that's recent. And, it's all the ones, Ken, that you always would think of: humanity, humility, integrity, courage, drive, transcendence, all of those, temperance. I mean, you can go around the wheel and you would say, oh yeah, I get it, because you've lived it yourself being in your field, and Sean, so have you. The one that I have the most interest in is normally humanity. I've seen it in professional sports teams that like each other, that actually care for each other, normally win. And I think you'll find the same in the media business or whatever team you've ever been on. Humanity, to me, is a real important piece of leadership, particularly in this day and age with what's going on in our world with COVID and the US, and we can go on and on and on. But all 11 parts of the character development area, I think, are important, and they all work against each other. So it's quite fascinating stuff they're doing at Ivy, which is, probably our leading business school, and many will argue that, but in Canada.
Millsy, it makes me nervous when I work with you because of how few of those character boxes I tick off. I just think you're thinking nonstop. This guy's got to get it together.
Listen, John, we all have areas we can work on, and that's nobody has perfect character. And no, I'm not kidding. And it's been good for me because there's certain aspects of my character that I know have been weak, and one works against the other. For instance, you can have an excess of drive, but if you don't have any temperance, how does that look? And I've had coaches like that. So one plays against the other, which makes this so fascinating. And believe me, Sean, we all have all kinds of areas that we could work on. So you're okay.
Well, I appreciate that, Milsey. I was told one of the things that makes you a great broadcaster, from people inside the business, is that teamwork aspect that you were talking about. And I wonder, as a former player, if you think and you see from people like you who played the game and who now have gone into broadcast, the strength that knowledge of teamwork brings to the broadcast area, because I've heard that people who come into the broadcast stream without playing sports can take a more kind of singular or egotistical view of how it's supposed to go, whereas players who you'd think would be the ones have the ego are the ones that come in and really are like, guys, we got to gel, we got to get this together if we're going to do this really well.
It's interesting because when you're a professional athlete, you either win, or in my day, you got sent to the minors. So you expected excellence at all times and a level. One of the few things I did like that Keenan used to say to us is that being a professional athlete is abnormal behavior. And it kind of is, because you have to find a level that maybe you don't even know you have. That level is very difficult to find in real life because people have families, they have jobs. I mean, the job obviously isn't as critical. They won't get sent to the minors. So my patience level when I got into the broadcasting wasn't great, because I thought everybody should be the same. Like, what are they doing? Why are they taking that time off? My drive was in excess. So I had to learn that. And then that helped me in terms of understanding, again, the humanity of what everybody's story is in a truck or wherever it might be in the course of a team broadcast. And I can tell you, as a color person, you're horrible without a good truck. You have no chance. You need a tape department to give you what you need. You need a good producer to help you out and bail you out when you make a mistake. And I make tons of them, believe me. You need a good director to give you the pictures. You need switcher. I mean, you need a good host that you can trust, so you can bang things like I do with you, Sean. And Ken, you wear this as well. I mean, it's a team business. And if you don't think it's a team, then A, you won't last very long, and B, you won't have very good broadcasts. So we rely heavily on everybody. It has to be that way in broadcasting.
Those were some lean times for the Senators early, Greg. I mean, what was it like to be broadcasting under those circumstances, and what did that teach you about the process and about that humility that you just touched on?
What a great question. We didn't have a win on the air my first year broadcasting until February. So it was extremely challenging. And it was a great learning area for me. It was spectacular. What I found was that if things got off the rails, there's lots of good stories on the other team. So you tended to tell as many good stories as you can and positive stories about the opposition, because frankly, the home team, although they didn't like to hear about the opposition all the time, they certainly didn't want to hear their own team getting bashed, particularly in Ottawa, where they were just so happy to have a team to begin with. And I'm sure that you went through the same process, although the team was better in Winnipeg. Everybody is just so pleased to have a team early on. And, you had to be careful how far you went in terms of being critical of the team, because everybody was just so thrilled that hockey was back. And that was the same scenario in Ottawa. But I still feel that way. I don't think that people tune in to hear negative, announcers cutting up the teams all night long. I mean, there's a lot of good things that happen in the course of the game, a lot of spectacular things that happen. And we're not journalists. Sometimes we get painted as being journalists. A color person is not a journalist. It's a completely different job. A journalist has a job to do, and that's to tell a story, and they can be positive as well, but more times than not, it's particularly a columnist has to bring things out the way they are. Whereas as a color person, yes, you have to do that. But my main focus is to tell why. And, you can tell why about a good story. You can tell why about a bad thing that happens on the ice. And I think it has to be a bit of both.
Millsy, you and I were doing a game down in Dallas a couple of years ago. I think it was 2 years ago, and we went out to the Pecan Lodge, which is a place I love taking guys. It's a great barbecue joint down in Dallas. We're standing in line because you got to stand in a long line to get your food. And we were doing a Habs Stars game, but the St. Louis Blues had been in town for the game the night before. And as we're standing in line, two guys who probably are in their mid-20s wearing St. Louis Blues paraphernalia came walking over and said, "Excuse me, are you Greg Millen?" And then had a long conversation with you. They were real big fans and talked about your time there. And I remember in your classic self-deprecating humor, when they walked away, I said to you, "Millsy, how often does that happen?" And you said, "Well, that's the first time." I guess it made me think, you've had so many stops, great times in Pittsburgh, great times in Chicago, you touched on St. Louis. Is there a team, an NHL team that you most identify with, or a time in your career that you most identify with?
Two. I mean, first of all, the first year Pittsburgh team, because I was in the NHL, coming from somebody who was basically enrolled in university hockey, out of the game, and then went and played with a fellow by the name of Wayne Gretzky and Sault Ste. Marie, and all of a sudden he put me back in the NHL. Basically, with the team we had, it was like a circus going to a show every night. Every building was sold out, and I was having a ball, and I thought I was done. So you can imagine how I was acting, having a blast. And so, that was a special time in Pittsburgh, just playing. And we had if you look at that roster, it was old school. I mean, there was lunch every day, and it was an old school team. I mean, we had Mahovlich, Kinderchuk, Lonsbury, Stackhouse, Denny Herron. I mean, I can give you a list. Greg Shepard, who out west. I mean, a lot of old school players. So I was taught that way, which really I appreciate. They were hard. It was a school of hard knocks on me, but they were really good to me as well. But they taught me a lot. And that was the one team. And then all my time in St. Louis was special. One of the reasons I think it was so special, because we were never supposed to do anything with our team, and we were always the underdogs, and we kind of proved everybody wrong a few times. And we were going through some financial hardships to the point where our owner, Barry Arnest, knew he was selling the team. I think this was the year we went to the Final Four and lost to Calgary, and we had players that were out and changed the curvature of their sticks through the course of a National Hockey League season, because Harry wouldn't order any more sticks, right-hand shots, because he didn't want to spend the money. So that's what we were going through, and it's hard to believe in this day and age, and composite sticks and so on, and the price of them. But so that was a special group. You had Doug Gilmour as an 18-year-old. You had Brian Sutter, who was a marvelous captain. You had Hall of Famer and Bernie Fedorko. You had Rob Ramage. My goalie partner, Warner. We were two pieces of work. I can tell you, we got stories we still laugh about. So that was and Jacques Demers, who unfortunately now is struggling away, but he was a player's coach, and we all loved Jacques. And Barclay Plager, one of my mentors, who was dying of brain cancer. We were carrying him around the airports, and he wouldn't give up. So there was a lot of stories inside the story. Again, the humanity piece. We really liked each other. So and a great market. So St. Louis was special.
You touched on junior hockey, Greg. What was it like to be around Roger Nielsen, and what influence did he have on you both as a person and as a player?
Great question, Ken. My father figure, my other father figure. And I think most people will tell you that have played for Rog. We miss him dearly. You look at the people that Roger has put in the league, either as players or now as coaches or executives. I mean, you can go down a list that's a mile long. Coley Campbell, I mean, it just won. Craig Ramsey, I mean, Bob Gainey. I mean, the Peterborough Mafia was alive and well because of Roger in those days. And he just taught us about life, not hockey. He taught us about hockey too, but it was more about life. We all worked as hockey school. We weren't allowed to leave the cottage until all our beds were made and our room was cleaned up. And I mean, there were just life skills all over the place with Roger. And to this day, we all thank Rog. We still think of him. We still talk about him. Mark Curtin, who's battling ALS right now, I know that, and his courage is remarkable. A former Pete, former NHL player, and you should see. I know that Roger's his influence. He said it many times, just to give you a small example. So we're all very fortunate that we had Roger as a coach. I'm extremely fortunate that he helped my life as a young man. And for all young coaches out there, please, 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 it's not about W's. It's not about wins and losses. It's about building people and building kids. And in minor hockey, we're so worried about wins and losses right now. We've got coaches being paid. It's really alarming to me. I don't like it. I don't like the AAA, AA, single A garbage that goes on at a young age. Not many kids make it. So if you're going to coach them, please coach them to be good kids and teach them life skills. Be an influential area The skill will look after itself. It always does. But the life skill is the most important. And I can't emphasize that enough to junior coaches, any coach, including NHL coaches, by the way. The best ones are life coaches, not just skill coaches. And you got one there in Winnipeg and Paul. I know that Paul is more than just a hockey coach. I know that because of the way he treats people and his humanity. He's more than that. So is Charlie and the rest of the staff. I mean, all of them, for that matter. I mean, they're all not just hockey coaches. And that's why they've been so successful in Winnipeg, in my opinion.
Yeah, the players here would absolutely agree with you. You touched on building players up. One of the things I've always been really impressed with you is the relationships that you've built over the years. I know Bernie Federko is a good friend of yours. You introduced him to me one time, and your influence with him is so strong that every time I go to St. Louis now and he sees me, he always gives me a wave and comes over to talk, which is absolutely phenomenal for me to think that, a guy like that is recognized me. It's all because of you. You've got so many relationships behind the scenes. It's one of the things when I started working with you that kind of surprised me, with so many influential people in the league. You know so much from talking with all of them. I think I was told by some people in the industry, and I thought this about you, your discretion is one of the things that you do really, really well as a broadcaster. The line that you realize exists of the things that you hear behind the scenes that you can take on air and the things that don't need to go on air. How did you find that line, and how do you approach that philosophy?
Well, first of all, I think when you're around a long time, Ken, you know this as well. You know so many people just from relationships. And if you're good to people like you guys are, I mean, it works both ways. So I think part of that's longevity, to be honest. But relationships are everything in life when you're in business. They still are, even though we're losing that a little bit. The HR departments tend to take that away from companies. But relationships are everything. It doesn't matter what we do. If we have relationships with people and trust, is the other big one. Then certainly a lot of things can happen in a positive way. In terms of the line, I think it's how you tell the story. I mean, for instance, Paul, as you know, tells us all a lot, and he trusts a lot of us. And but you have to tell that story in such a way that A, you're not burning Paul, and B, you have the ability to look for something in the game, but you're not saying, Paul Maurice told me that he wasn't going to play this so-and-so or whatever. You use it to you as information, but you don't overuse it. And I think common sense will tell you when something's being told to you that you just don't say at all. I mean, and there's a lot of that happens for all of us in the business. We get told things that we just can't say to anybody, but it helps us paint a nice picture for the fan if it comes along. And so it's valuable information that you may be able to use at some point, and often it's in a positive way. But there's no question, there's a big line there, and it can't be crossed, or you'd never have that trust with the people you're dealing with. And it's important to me. My reputation, like all of our reputations, I think is extremely important.
Just a slight shift of gears, Greg. What was it like to be a goalie dad? I mean, we have a lot of hockey parents and hockey players that watch the show. So I'm just curious for what that was like for you as a guy who was an NHLer, as a guy who was a goalie coach. What was it like to be a hockey dad?
Horrific. My wife couldn't even watch by the end of it. She wouldn't even go to the games, and I had walked a lot not because you didn't want, first of all, as a goalie dad, you don't want your son or your daughter to let anybody down. And that's the first thing. And the second thing is you don't want them to be disappointed. You just hate when they're sad, like all parents do. It wasn't about the wins and the losses. It was just about all of the stuff around it. It was torture. And then the other thing with torture with my son is he wouldn't stop. I mean, he got booted in the butt so many times, and the East Coast League down to the Pacific, all over the map, right from junior on. And I kept thinking, oh, Charlie, please, that's enough, enough. But I couldn't say that to him. As it turns out now, I mean, I think, I was always worried how he was going to react when he was finished, because I was scared that this was really going to affect him like a parent would. But as it turns out, it's the best thing that ever happened to him. I mean, he got kicked in the butt so many times that the School of Hard Knocks has helped his character So he's gone, I think, in a way that I'm quite thrilled about. But at the time, it was torture. When you got that call, oh, he's gone again. Now he's going to another team. Now he's back on the bus. Oh, now he's coming home for 2 weeks. Then he's going again. I mean, it was just a nightmare. So that was difficult, really, really difficult, particularly when, he got into junior and then into pro. But he got a degree, thank goodness. Thank goodness for the CIS. It's a huge, I think, thankful to that program. I hope they keep going because it's very important to so many young players. Now he's in sales, and now he started roughing our linesmen in the American Hockey League, and so which has been something that he seems to really like. I don't know why, but he seems to really like it. So that's been fun for him. But the answer is it was torture. I always got disappointed when things didn't probably go the way in terms of that humanities piece that we were talking about with coaches, and I never got involved. I sat back and said nothing, but it was hard to do that. And but in the end, I think all those lessons have really been good for Charlie. So it goes for all the children, right? School of Hard Knocks is still a pretty good school if you can manage it.
Millsy, when I work with you, it's always, I hop on a plane and it's hard to get back to Winnipeg, right? For you, it's easy to get back to Toronto, but you still have, to travel. And I feel like we're kind of kindred spirits in that regard, because it's always hard to get to where we're going and hard to get home because you grew up a Toronto kid, spent some time in Peterborough. I don't know if this is why you ended up in that area, but you live in the Peterborough area now, despite the fact that you're constantly traveling to get to NHL cities. Why did you decide to set up there, and why did being in broadcast and having to be in these big cities not draw you into Toronto or Ottawa or one of the major centers?
Well, I don't tell many I grew up in Toronto anymore. Sorry, Toronto. My wife was from Peterborough. I played junior hockey in Peterborough. We didn't know where to settle when we were done, so we came home. That's the short answer of that. But I must say I enjoy a small town. I enjoy bringing our children up in a smaller center. It was much easier, I think. I'm back. Yeah,
there you go.
Oh, won't you start now, cottage internet? So anyway, that's the main reason. That's the main reason that we came home, and I'm glad we did. It worked out really well. And in doing those Ottawa games, I was a 3-hour drive to Ottawa as well on a horrible number 7 road, mind you, but it worked out.
You know what? We'd love to keep going with you, but I think we've done well to get through with your internet, which I'm guessing is held together by Scotch tape and bubble gum. But Millsy, it's great to have you on. Behind me, I've got the powder blue Hockey Night in Canada jacket. I felt like I could put it on on the wall because we wore it that one time for the Saturday night. That was a broadcast I did with you, which means a ton to me because you've been a real mentor for me in my career. You've always taken the time to spend time with me. We always end up going out to eat unless you're meeting really important people, which you have to quite a bit on the road. And you've always done a good job of helping me. And I brought up that question about the line of discretion because you've quietly taken me aside at times before to make sure that I was going to abide that line and that I knew where that line was very helpful for me in my career. And I appreciate all your guidance, and I appreciate what a great guest you've been. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's Sean, I appreciate all the kind words, but I can tell you that, and I'm not just, throwing roses out here, that Winnipeg is a pretty special market for me to come to. Ken seeing you all the time and Sean and the way it's just, there's something about Winnipeg that I really enjoy. I think it's the small town atmosphere. Everybody's warm and friendly. Your coaching staff is that way. Your ownership is incredible. I think people in Winnipeg, I know it's, you got a big win the other night. That's fantastic. And when you're in a city and you get caught up in your team and you want them to, I really do love coming right down to the technical crew. Everybody, there's something about Winnipeg, and it says a lot for Ken, it's a lot for you, Sean, and everybody that surrounds it. It's kind of cool. So it goes both ways, as it always does, and it's always fun to come to Winnipeg and see all the familiar faces and have a few laughs. And Scott Oak, of course, with his dumb jokes and all of those things are pretty special. So I just hope that I got a couple more years in me. I hope I got a couple more years in me where I can see everybody, because that's the part that I will miss for sure.
Well, we're looking forward to it, Millsy. Thank you so much for for joining us today. Can't wait to catch up with you in the future.
And I'm sorry about.
It was good. It was going to end that way one way or another, I think, Ken, the way that that internet was going. But your takeaways from today, my friend.
Yeah, lots of fun. Appreciate Greg for joining us, and also Craig as well. I mean, just fantastic insight from some great folks there that we gotten to know a little bit over the years. It's just a lot of fun to be able to dig into those stories and to hear those perspectives, which are just fantastic. I mean, Craig is a guy that you and I both spoke with a lot after that game in Regina. That was the first time I really had a long, in-depth conversation with him and Jim Houston. It was a lot of fun. Heard some great stories there, and Greg's a guy that's always been fun to chat with on the road and around Winnipeg, and just fascinating people, right? I mean, they're great at their jobs, but it's just great to get to know them a little bit as people and what they've gone through in various times in their lives. And yeah, I mean, just like we talked about, the goal of the show was to peel back the layers, and it's just really interesting you learn something new every week about these players, even when you do all the research that you and I do kind of going into the shows. You kind of don't ever always know which direction it's going to go, but just a lot of fun and just some fantastic insights once again.
Well, and for a guy like Millsy, the players that he's played with in his career, like we didn't even have to ask him about Gretzky. It just kind of pops up. We didn't get to talk to him about Lemieux, right, who he played the early parts of his career with. He spent time with Ron Francis. I mean, like if you're looking at the list of, the top scorers in NHL history, he's played with a whole bunch of them. And then you can see like the guys that mean a lot to him. I wanted to get into, there's this hilarious story about from the Hockey Night in Canada broadcast guys. Jeff Johnson, who I bring up all the time on this show, is telling me about a game where the Hockey Night in Canada crew is in town in St. Louis, and Darren Pang, who does the local, he's spent some time with Sportsnet, but he does the local broadcast there. They saw that those two guys were down at ice level, kind of side by side, and they were kind of jawing at each other, former teammates, and they're reaching over the boards and they're jawing at each other. So someone in the building had the brilliant idea to put up this old school St. Louis Blues versus Chicago Blackhawks game in which Millsy is playing on one side and Panger is playing on the other side, and they both get entirely lit up. Like the final score is like 8-7 or something like that, and they're just showing the highlights of all of the goals that each of them had let in. And they're both, the TV crew at the time is catching them down on the ice, kind of leaning over the boards, watching the game, and then jawing each other after every time one of them lets in the goal. But that, to me, I love that story because it really kind of captures the gregarious nature of both Panger, who's an absolutely great guy, and Millsy, who never take themselves too seriously and yet do seriously good work across their lives in everything that they do. I love people like that. One last thing, Ken?
No, just like I said, we're blessed to be around great people. And this is what we miss, right? Those times on the road where you're having those laughs, whether it's in the hallway waiting for a scrum to happen, or in the days where our lives weren't directly related to Zoom each and every day. It's just fantastic stuff. And as you mentioned, I mean, man, we're going to get Craig back because I want to talk to him about what it was like as a rookie to be playing with a guy like Mario Lemieux, right? I mean, it's we're just basically scratching the surface, but yeah, super fun. And that's been the beauty of what we're doing with the program, and just the hockey community is just such a great thing to be part of. And it's great to be able to have, the engagement from the, folks that are commenting, folks that are watching, folks that are listening. I mean, it really helps. We're trying to show the human side, and Craig talked about humanity so much. I mean, I guess in our market, a lot of times folks don't really get to know the Sportsnet guys or the Hockey Night guys because they're not on their TV most nights. So it's just been neat to be able to try to provide that kind of a perspective and background on those guys as well.
Nice to do that, and nice to spend time with our audience who is always so positive, and we really appreciate that. Someone had mentioned they missed this. Of course, if you did miss it, you can go to our Kenny and Renny YouTube page. We've got all of these shows up here. If you want to go back, if you're just discovering this Friday thing that we do, go back. We've had some phenomenal guests. This is episode 13, and I like every last one of them. I think we've found some really interesting insights with the people. So go check that out if you're there, subscribe. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us. It's a game day. We're about to get to work and start digging into that. So come check us out. We're going to be on Tim and Friends later on today. So if you want to check that out, that would be a good place to get our take on the game before we head into it. After that, we'll be on Instagram 45 minutes before the game for our pregame show. And we'll be right here in this spot, either on YouTube, Ken's Twitter account, or my Twitter account, for our post-game show, which is going to be on, again, a little bit late. We want to warn people because Ken has writing that he needs to do before he can get there. The Illegal Curve guys, we've talked to them. They've said that they'll stretch their show a little bit longer to kind of tie people over. So if you want a place to hang out before you come see us, check out the Illegal Curve show. I did drop in on that show after game one. But yeah, check that out. Then come check us out. We just appreciate spending time with you so much because you've all, I know you're so complimentary, and we hope that we're providing the service to you that you're providing to us by responding. So thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the game day.